Welcome to Puck Talk CS. I'm Matthew Mugno, joined by Belle Fraser, the hockey news reporter for the Boston Bruins. Her coverage of Boston University, phenomenal. Still a student there, so juggling a few different things. Worked with Larry Brooks Walker, the New York Post, over the summer on an internship. So she's grew up New York Ranger area, from the city, from deep down in the jungle land. Belle, how are you doing today?
What an intro. I'm good, thank you. Yeah, New York, born and bred, so big Rangers fan, but hopped over to the dark side for 4 years. I'm at Boston University, which I actually obviously love. And yeah, really excited to be covering the Bruins this year and BU. Got Macklin Celebrini on BU. We were just talking a little bit about college hockey before now, but very excited for Saturday's matchup. I think it'll be a big test for two teams who have gotten off to a really hot start.
Right? I mean, for two young people in the industry to be able to cover the Boston Bruins, like coming off of last year, I'm sure was
Yeah,
exciting. Let's hop right in. I mean, they come off of that Game 7 loss, right? But it's the most historic season ever, regular season ever for the club. That's now in its centennial season. I mean, you're kind of knocking it out of the park with the year, you're hopping in, but they lose a bunch of players, right? And we'll even talk about Lucic, I'm sure, in a little bit. But just over the summer, there were a lot of movement.
yeah.
So what was it like for you hopping in? Like at dev camp, what was that like? Or whenever you'd started, what was it like, the starting point? And then are you shocked at where they're at right now?
Yeah, so I came in training camp, and I mean, the narrative for everyone around it, you lose Bergeron, you lose Krejci, your top 2 centers, like and it's not only the positional stuff, it's locker room, those guys were the heartbeat of that organization for so many years. So and Montgomery said it to start it off, he's like he addressed it, like, "We're gonna have to figure out what our new team identity is. We're gonna stick to our core values, to how we like to play." You know, the Bruins are always that gritty, grinding, in your face, but still kind of a flair team too. So you know, he was saying we're going to build off the past. We're not going to get too far away from who the Bruins are, but for the first time in what 10-ish years, there was so much opportunity at training camp, and that was really exciting because most of the years these guys come in and they kind of know, like, all right, I'm going to go to Providence, or I'll try to stick around for as long as I can, but the top six at least is locked in. And you know, Matt Poitras, Johnny Beecher have been some of the biggest storylines for the Bruins at the beginning of the season. They came in leapfrogged veterans that the Bruins brought in over the offseason to try to fill those holes and have been really big parts of their success. And then I think you just have to give it to Swayman and Olmark too. They've been the backbone of this team this year and given them chances to win in games that, you know, maybe they might have needed a push from someone like Bergeron, but
Mhm.
that's a little overview. Yeah, I mean, I'm feel super privileged to be able to cover the team this year, and I mean, props to them. Like they kind of skated without the pressure, and it's worked
Mhm.
out for them.
Yeah, I think that's an angle that, for everyone out there, like even myself, I asked Dan Rosen, like I was like, "What are they doing right?" And he was like, "They're winning a lot of these like one goal games, and there wasn't pressure really coming into the season because it was like they they had the disappointment last year, and then a lot of guys walked. So it was like, where are they going to go this year?" I had the chance to see, I believe, Low Rise, how you pronounce his
Yep,
name, right?
Mason Lohrei, yep.
From Ohio State. Like, I had the chance to see him in person, and Jeff Gordon was there. So I thought that was really cool. He was there looking at some players. He signed the next day. Like, they were eliminated, and he signed the next day. So players like Patra, right, is how
Mhm.
you pronounce it.
Yep,
Lorai, I mean, how have they stepped into their roles? You mentioned like Johnny Beecher. He was a late first round pick.
yeah.
How are those guys looking? Like, were they they had the opportunity? Were you shocked when they made the team?
I think at the beginning of training camp, you know, it's like the classic quotes, "I want to be a surprise. I'm going to put my best foot forward every day." And then as the roster got cut down, you realize that those two guys were some of the best centers on the ice in terms of Beecher and Poitras. And, you know, Jesper Boquist wasn't really showing up. They moved Geeky to the wing, Morgan Geeky, that is.
Mhm.
And so you could kind of feel it. And I think the biggest thing for those two guys is that they just bought into the role that the Bruins needed them to play. Like you said with Beecher, he was late first round pick. He doesn't view himself, at least at Michigan when he played in college hockey too. You know, he's not a fourth line guy. But the Bruins needed a tough fourth line center, and that's what he became. And he's been playing really well there, especially when Lauka was out. Lucic situation changed obviously in a terrible manner, but he was out with an ankle injury. So they had Oscar Steen come up. Danton Heinen's been playing there. So Beecher has kind of just found his consistency no matter his line mates. And Patra too, he's, I mean, a top talent guy. I think it was a surprise for leadership that they'll take credit for drafting him, but I don't think anyone thought that he would be this good this soon. And he's played up and down the lineup. He's been on the first line. He's played with Marchand, Pastrnak. He's currently playing on the third line with Jake DeBrusk and Heinen. He's been great. And then Lohrei came in. The Bruins defensive core last 2 weeks, McAvoy was suspended. Grzelcyk
Mhm.
was out with injury. So they pulled up Ian Mitchell from Providence and Lohrei. And I think Lohrei was the one who made the biggest impact. His offensive upside, I mean, like you watched him. Is huge, and he's just like he has this swagger to him, like he came out for his first NHL game. You saw it through training camp. It was like this kid's here to play. And they paired him with Brandon Carlo at first, which I thought was great because Carlo's more of a stay-at-home defenseman, and it let Lohrei not take less responsibility on the back end, but kind of let him play a little more free. And now he's on the first pair with McAvoy, who's back from suspension and playing some of his best hockey. So I mean, things we can get into stats, whatever specifics, but things have just been working out for them. And there's so much room for growth. Montgomery, make sure to say that specifically off the rush, defending off the rush, getting to a team game, playing a full 60 minutes. But I mean, 13-1-2 to start the season, it's hard. It's hard to point at anything super negative, I would say.
Now, with that, I know they play Tampa tonight, so just
Yeah.
obviously for our listeners, I always say like things will change because by the time this drops, like the Rangers will have a few games under their belt too. That may change things, but both teams that we're covering are in very similar position, right? They had some
Mhm.
players take opportunities, earn roles. How much of this goes to David Montgomery? Like, how much of this is really about the system he's got in place? Because last season, you say, yeah, Pasta, Marchand, Bergeron, you have the big dogs. They
Yeah.
brought in assets. They had Taylor Hall, Tyler Bertuzzi popped off. Those players aren't around right now. So you can definitely point to the fact it wasn't just about the talent. Like you mentioned, it's not about the numbers. How much of it goes back to the head coach?
I think you got to give him credit. In one of our preseason articles, actually for the Hockey News Bruins site, we were writing about how Montgomery's kind of showing his true colors as a coach this year because he came in, and of course, a lot of last year was his credit too. But those guys were looking to Bergeron in between periods, like
Hmm.
the guys who had been in that room. I think, and Montgomery said this at the beginning of this year how the Krejci, Bergeron, even Marchand, the guys still in that room, McAvoy, were a huge part of getting him acclimated to Boston, getting him comfortable with his voice in the room. But this year, we've said it's the new look Bruins, quote unquote. And he has to have a bigger voice. He has to demand a lot more from them, I think, and reset that standard that maybe Bergeron was able to tell the guys like away from practice. And you saw, I mean, last week after they lost in overtime to Montreal, they came back, had bagged them at the end. I know Laviolette does that for fun. It's
Hmm.
maybe why the Rangers are so conditioned, but Bruins practices, there's very little sprints, that type of thing. And the past week, Montgomery's had running a lot harder practices. So, yeah, you got to give credit to him, but I think you got to give credit to guys like Charlie Coyle, who's really stepped up. David Pastrnak, everyone thought he would maybe fall off a bit this year, leading the team in points. I think it's 27 right now. Um,
Hmm.
so those guys, Bergeron and Krejci meant a lot to those guys, and I think it's a point of pride to kind of carry on their legacy. So yes, it's Montgomery, but I also think it's kind of that legacy that they left, and those guys who played with them for however many years, yeah, want to respect that and carry that on.
Now, what about a Charlie McAvoy? You mentioned like I remember he scores that goal in the Cup final 2019. It's now been a number of years. Grew up with an Adam Fox, right? New York guy. There were some rumors maybe the Rangers try and pull him in.
Imagine,
No,
imagine.
I mean he's their guy, right? He is Beantown's guy.
Yeah.
The conversations like he seems to always be outside of that Norris voting.
Hmm.
How you've covered now, you've seen some Ranger action, right? I know you wrote a piece about Lindgren in your stint with the New York Post. Like,
Yeah.
what do you see from McAvoy, and like what what do the other NHL regular fans just not know about him?
Yeah. I mean, something interesting in this particular moment about McAvoy is he's kind of had to reevaluate his game in the past 2 weeks. He had a 4-game suspension for a head hit on Oliver Ekman-Larsson, in the Florida Panthers game a couple weeks ago, and he appealed it. He went and it was usually you get 2 games, then from there, if there was an injury, they add a game, and if you have a history, they add a game, and neither of those were true. So, that was the argument. But he was really thoughtful in his response to the media. Usually, sometimes he's a little quick with the game notes and stuff, but he and it came in the wake of the tragedy of Adam Johnson, and he was just saying like, I am going to the rink. We all go to the rink. We want to leave as healthy as we left. We came here, and my intent is not to hurt anyone, and um, that type of thing. And it didn't feel like a PR answer. And in the past week, reporters have kind of asked him like, "You had 0 hits tonight. Like, are you changing your game because of that?" And he admitted he was like, "I'm being a little more careful. Like, I was hesitant to throw some hits, but." You saw him in the Montreal game. He came out and kind of looked like the same old Charlie McAvoy. But I think that's huge about him. Like he is that physical guy. He has to be, especially on if you're playing in the first 2 pairs. But he has that offensive upside, and the coaching staff always says they're like lean into it because he has that shot, and he's good around the net, even though he won't get down there a lot of the time. So um, I would just like his hockey IQ too. I guess that goes hand in hand with the thoughtfulness. Like he's not just a meathead, like suspension type of guy. Like that's just not how I would categorize Charlie McAvoy. And I can say that unbiased because I am a Rangers fan who has watched the Rangers play against him. But yeah, and him and Grizzly, I'll add to, they just have such good chemistry together. Grizzly is coming off of LTIR on November 25th, actually. So he'll potentially be an option for that Rangers game. Um,
Mhm.
those two had a year playing together at Boston University, actually. And then both landed at the Bruins. And they're kind of so in step with each other in the way that Fox and Lindgren are too.
Mhm.
And you're almost seeing like Miller and Trupa kind of reach that level as well, which I'm sure you can talk about it. But
Oh, yeah.
um, yeah, I mean, he's such a big part of the Bruins this year, assistant captain for the first time. And I think he used to be, young Charlie McAvoy, big talent. We're excited for the future, and the future is here. Like he could be a captain in 5 years. So I think you're definitely seeing that in his on and off ice performance and role on the team this year.
You mentioned leadership.
Yeah.
You went from Chara to Bergeron for a season, right? And now
Yeah.
it's Marchand, 39.
Yeah.
So you say 5 years. With the turnover, they're doing a phenomenal job, I mean, managing that. There's no drop off. But with the team battling adversity, they lose, right, in a crazy series
Yeah.
last spring, and I feel like I keep mentioning it, so let's just rip the Band-Aid off on that and talk about that. Like, they lose that crazy series, changes over the summer. The Rangers and Bruins are playing this week. That's why you're on the podcast, right?
Yeah.
If one team's gonna lose, and I think something that in the Rangers sphere is happening is they're winning everything. When's the point where that kind of falters, right? And do you feel that it's a similar thing for the Bruins? Like maybe that adversity, maybe losing a few games now is going to benefit them instead of losing those games in early April, May?
Yeah, I mean, it's funny I'm on Bruins Twitter now from I went from Raiders to Bruins Twitter, but
Yeah.
a lot of it is everyone's excited for how the team's playing, but also like this reminds me a bit too much of last year. Um,
Hmm.
like they're just a little bit too good in the regular season, which it's just how being a fan is.
Yeah.
You're superstitious. You never want to go through that heartbreak again.
Yeah.
So I get it, but I also think it's a fresh start. Like I they always say it's a fresh start. I know you're always thinking about it. You never forget something like that, especially with the circumstances of Bergeron not coming back. But
Hmm.
I honestly think that they're not trying to let that impact their game at all. And Montgomery said, I think it was last month, he was like, listen, adversity is going to come, and we're not playing perfect hockey. But I will say, in the games that they have lost, and it's only been one in regulation, they don't look good. They're not collapse. Well, they collapsed in the third in one of them, but game in and game out, they're playing well enough to win these games. In the beginning of the season, they opened with like Anaheim, Chicago, a little bit of a easier schedule.
Mhm.
And the past 10 days or so, it's like it's kind of legit. Like it wasn't just a flop there. So I mean, I think it's true for any team. Everyone needs to go through adversity before the playoffs. But they've got 60 or so games, and I'm sure they'll hit it. But that it's a close locker room in there, and I think they're really in touch with what they need to do and when they play their best hockey, and they know how to get back to it too. They're a team that can go in between the intermission and come out in the second or third and look like a completely different club. So, and kind of similar to the Rangers in that respect too. So I think that's
Mhm.
why Saturday is going to be so telling, especially in conference type team and the rivalry as it stands. So
Yeah, I mean, there have been moments the last few years. You have the Ranger perspective, Panarin throwing the glove.
yeah,
There's been they always play on Thanksgiving. It's always like growing up, it was like, the Derek Stepan broken jaw. Like there's
yeah,
always
yeah.
something going on. Um, with Saturday, the Rangers play Dallas tonight. Wedgwood starting again. By the time this comes out, it's a wash. But the Flyers are 10-7-1. Like they're no pushover this year, John
Mhm.
Tortorella style. And then they play Boston. So my feeling going into this game is, I guess I'll say my thoughts
Yeah.
with the game. I think they might struggle a little bit coming off of the back to back, and I think that's where they're going to have to probably learn those. Listen, this group's been together now for a little while. It's similar to some of those Bruins players where there's guys that have been around the block,
Mhm.
so it's like I don't think the adversity is going to drop them to like an 0-5-1, but like they might struggle a little bit, and I think it might be better right now. Right? Again, those are things out of control, but going into a match against a team like the Rangers, you mentioned how they had a little bit of an easier schedule. What are you looking for in the Bruins team to like do? Is there something you mentioned that they're not playing perfect hockey? Like,
Yeah.
what do they need to improve upon? And like, what do they have to bring to the table to play a team like the Rangers?
Yeah, a couple of things. Quickly, when you were naming the like being a Rangers fan, the things that you always remember, especially with the rivalries. Remember Marchand a couple years ago came out and said Lindgren wasn't going to be in the league for long.
Yeah.
Um,
Bruins draft
that,
pick.
yeah, and that's something that stuck with me, which I just find funny now that Lindgren
Mhm.
is such an integral part of the Rangers.
Yeah.
And you always see Lindgren has a little more jump for a lot of reasons against the Bruins.
Oh, yeah.
Um,
When he can throw the body more, like, he is
Yeah,
up.
yeah. But I think a couple things for the Bruins. One, Jake DeBrusk has 1 goal, 5 assists, 6 points through 15 games, 16 games they've played so far. And he was at the 27 goal mark last year. He was out for a cumulative like 7 weeks due to a couple different injuries, so he almost hit the 30 goal mark. He's in a contract year. And so he was another big guy coming into the season where he's always been on the wing of either Krejci or Bergeron, and it's like, can he reach the same production? Can he be the same player or a better player? And the team needs him to be a better player to pick up that offensive production. And it just hasn't been coming for him. Different parts of his game have gotten better. He's been on the PK. He's looked good there. I mean, he's been forced to play a better defensive game if he's not scoring.
Mhm.
But he's playing with Matt Patra and Danton Heinen, and no disrespect for them. They're great players. They're arguably maybe producing more than DeBrusque has this season, but that's a guy who's kind of used to being in the top 6 and used to being he's a goal scorer. Like that's his role as an NHL player. And Montgomery was talking about the mental aspect of it a couple days ago. And just that when it gets this far along in your slump, you kind of start getting away from the things that you do when you're playing good hockey because you're frustrated or you're trying to switch it up. And it's really about sticking to the process. And it sounds cliche, but you do see him maybe cheating the play a little bit sometimes just because he wants to cut the crease first to try to get that tap in goal to just try to get the schneid off. So I think it'd be huge for the Bruins, huge for him if he just starts rolling before Christmas. Because for the Bruins management, he DeBrus said he wants to stay in Boston. He made his intentions clear, but it's like it's a business. And
Yeah.
no matter how good he's been for you in the past, if he's under 10 points by December, it's tough. It's really tough. So I think that's one thing. I think two, I mean, I mentioned Montgomery said this, but just their transition game has been good. But the other way, I think there's been a couple, odd man rushes where the Swayman Olmark tandem, that's why they're so good, is because they keep their guys in games. and also just starting on time. I think that's something that a lot of teams talk about, but there's been some games where it'll take 10, 15 minutes for them to find their legs, and or they'll take, they've taken 10 penalties in the past 3 games, and their PK is one of the best in the league. So it kind of bails them out in terms of that. But it's just the discipline on the little details. When you're up by 4 or 3 goals, it can be easy to let up a little bit. And I think you've seen that with the Bruins in some games on their long road stretches and stuff like that. But it's something that Montgomery does not accept. Like, that is an unacceptable part of the game. And he tells them. So I think those are the main things, just detail oriented, maybe a little more discipline, and getting some more depth scoring for sure.
Now, Belle, that's Saturday's coming
Yeah.
after Big Turkey Day. What's the experience been like for you being like that is a beautiful practice facility they have up
Yeah.
there. Is it awesome? Like, is it a short travel to get there? I mean, is it nice? It's like all windowed out. Like, what's the experience like at the practice facility?
Yeah, no, it's really cool. The commute's funny. I, true New Yorker, do not have a driver's license or a car.
Wow.
Um,
Okay.
I'm working on it. I'm working on it. But Boston transportation, public transportation is nothing like the subway. I miss the subway dearly. So you either have to take, the commuter rail to the green line, whatever. So it's a schlep sometimes, but again, no
Mhm.
complaints. It's pretty close if I accidentally call an Uber. But yeah, it's really cool. I mean, I'm sure you had this experience too, just being having a credential for NHL access is pretty unbelievable. The first couple practices, I was definitely like, "Oh man, like this is pretty cool." But yeah,
Mhm.
Warrior's awesome. They have open practices, so there's always fans in there, which
Oh, that's
um,
cool.
is cool. Yeah, and then locker rooms down there. It's pretty central in Boston, so it's nice that people get to come in, and the rink is used for a bunch of different stuff. Like Shattuck St. Mary's is playing there right now, I think, against Kent. So yeah, Boston and New England just in general is so hockey oriented.
Mhm.
And you really feel that. That's part of the reason I love it here so much. But yeah, Warriors awesome. And then TD Garden. It's not the garden, but for a home rink in the NHL, it's pretty sweet to be able to go there, a couple times a week.
I had the very fortunate opportunity to see Post Malone there. So that
No
was really
way.
cool. Like I got to see Bobby Orr statue and like
Yeah.
I was there. It is really like I said I've been to Toronto as well. So I've
Mhm.
been to those are the two away arenas I've been to besides Emily and those I felt like it was TD's like a combination of whatever Toronto's probably some form of Rogers something
Mhm.
and MSG. I felt like it was kind of a combo of both. So it
Yeah.
is really nice. Now we're kind of throwing around college hockey a few times, touching upon it. We crossed pads in Tampa
Yeah.
for the national championship. Which
Saddest
is
weekend of my
awesome.
life, happiest weekends of yours, right?
Oh, I mean, that was like peak. In fact,
Yeah.
I was like, I gotta wear it. Now you're covering Boston this year. In fact, they play Wednesday.
They do.
So I mean the timing's just
What
immaculate
a big
here.
week.
Right? Huge week. I mean, it's
Yeah.
like both teams for college, both teams for that. What's the vibe you get from like the whole city right now? Like they have Celebrini, who's likely the first overall pick in the
Yeah.
2024 NHL draft. What's the vibe like in the city of Boston with hockey? I mean, we always know it's a hockey city. Mike Ruzioni, I read his biography over the summer.
Good one.
Grew up there. I mean, like it is ingrained in the city. But
Yeah.
right now is a pretty special moment. So, what's the vibe you're getting from everybody? You cover a college hockey team in college hockey. You still write like you headman that operation right at Boston University,
Yeah.
and now you're covering for the Hockey News the Bruins. So you're kind of like at the peak of both.
Yeah.
What do you see down below from the fans?
Yeah. I mean, it's so much fun, covering B right now. I think you saw it last year. They made it to the Frozen Four after not even getting a tournament bid the year before. And the program, huge props to Jay Pandolfo, who was assistant for the Bruins a couple years ago before he came to BU. The program was just revitalized. Like the buy-in, the pride was back, and the talent. We had 10 seniors come back last year because they knew that roster could do better things than lose in the opening round of the Hockey East playoffs. And they just had a beanpot to their name. And not that the beanpot doesn't mean a lot, but kids come to BU to win national championships. The
Mhm.
quote's thrown around, but they come to BU to raise banners. And that's what they did. They got regular season and Hockey's championship, fell short in the Frozen Four. But coming into this year, I mean, same with Quinnipiac. The expectations and the standards are just like completely through the roof after you
Mhm.
make it that far. And I mean, Macklin Celebrini is so good. Like I obviously number projected number overall pick, you're gonna expect them to be good, but it's such a joy watching him. The kid is so creative. He's 17. He's averaging 2 points per game. Um,
Wow.
Most guys are like, "Oh, I want to be a point per game player." He's doubling that.
Mhm.
And he just makes everyone around him so much better too. He had 4 assists this weekend, 4 assists last weekend. So even if he's not
Oh.
scoring, he's getting guys like Quinn Hudson, who was in a slump to score and got moved up to the top line. So that's really cool. And it's obviously more than celebrating. It's a full team effort, and you see that. But it's funny you say just the buzz around it because Friday against Maine, Jim Montgomery went to Maine, Jeremy Swayman went to Maine. Um,
Wow.
and Boston is like the Bruins are half BU guys. So
Mhm.
Montgomery was in the building, Swayman was there, Shattenkirk was there. I believe Matt Grislick was there. Colby Cohen was doing the broadcast. Jeff Gorton was there because his son Jack Gorton's on the team. Kent Hughes was there because his son Jack Hughes is on the team. All the Sportsnet's guys were there. Ryan Whitney was there. It was really cool to see college hockey have this platform again. And,
Mhm.
they're bringing in viewers. Montgomery came to Bruins practice yesterday dressed in all BU stuff because he lost a bet because BU swept Maine. And he talked about how lucky he is to be able to see elite college hockey and how important it is for his kids to see elite college hockey. So, yeah, it's just BU is lucky to be kind of one of those blue bloods of the college hockey programs, but you definitely feel it. And to be part of it and kind of walk the halls with those people around you is awesome. And BU got off to a really brutal start to the season, but they found themselves this month, as has Quinnipiac. I think I read 31 goals in 5 games or something.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's a huge test. Everyone wants to beat the reigning national champions. But I think Quinnipiac, your guys' goalie, Vinny Duplessis, was our backup last year. He
Yep.
kind of got kicked to the curb when we brought in Matthew Caron from Brown.
Dog. He's a
Yeah,
dog. He's
he's
really good.
Vinny Duplessis. Everyone at Boston University has only fantastic things to say about him. He's such a gamer. Um, and again, it's business, whatever. But I mean, that sucked for him last year, kind of being like, we're not going to choose you as our starter. You might
Mhm.
want to enter the transfer portal. So yeah, I'm sure he has an extra chip on his shoulder. So I mean, yeah, it's a great storyline. Um, and all eyes, it's a top 5 matchup. BU is ranked number 5 this week, Quinnipiac number 3. I think it's BU's first top 5 matchup at Aganis since like 2010. Shout
Oh,
out BU
that's
Hockey Stats
awesome.
who found that. So yeah, it's awesome.
Now for the Ranger listeners here, I know you keep up. You just said you keep up. Gabe Perreault. I've asked you
Yeah.
questions about him before. I wrote a piece on him. Everything college hockey I talked to them about, like
Mhm,
what they see from him. They're like one of the best playmakers in the draft. You've seen him with your own two pair of eyes. I have too. I
mhm,
went up to watch. I was a fan, like I wasn't covering the game, but I
mhm.
had the opportunity to see him play QU banner raising night. What do you see from Gabe Perreault?
I mean, that might be the Rangers' biggest steal in the draft in the
Ever.
past. Yeah, I mean, and you also Rangers drafting, you look at the past 5 years and half of those guys aren't even in the NHL anymore.
Yeah.
But no, this is huge for the Rangers. He's playing on a line with Will Smith and Ryan Leonard, who are also high up in the draft. They all played at the program together the last 2 years, so they have that chemistry. But they just got off running. I think at BU, you saw we had a really talented freshman class, but it took a couple series for them to kind of click and find their feet. But BC, I hate to say it, they've been going, they've been buzzing, and Perot, his consistency, I think, is what has been maybe not the biggest surprise because he was highly scouted, but weekend in and weekend out, he is either on the score sheet or a huge part of their momentum during the game. And as a freshman too, and that's a team that has guys like Cutter Gauthier on it who
Yeah.
are probably going to be a star in the NHL in the next 2 or 3 years. So, yeah, I mean, I think Rangers fans should be really excited about that, and just the BC program. Again, I hate saying this. I'm still at BU, but Greg Brown's over there. He was with the Rangers. He's the head coach now, and that's just for where you want your prospects to be. BC's a program you want it to be at. I would say BU's the one you might want a little bit more, but in terms of developmentally, him playing this high level hockey on a team that's ranked within the top 5, top 10 of the country every week, playing top teams and gunning for a national championship this year too. That's the type of experience that you want your prospects to be getting, and he's getting it, and he's taking the opportunity. So it's really cool to see. And I know when BC scores, I'm like, but then I see it's Perot, and I'm like, okay, so good for the Rangers. But yeah, I mean, he's had a really hot start.
Yeah, a little bit like Chris Kreider, Johnny Gaudreau
Yeah,
era for BC, the Hawks right now. I talked to James Murray actually about Quinnipiac with the Hockey East, and that's something that's very
gotta
controversial.
happen.
Yeah, I think it would be so cool if they went there, because I find the Ivies did something that I respected at the time, like you do you. They shut down from COVID, but I think it hurt. A lot of things led up to why it's not competitive right now in the ECAC. They
Yeah,
shut down, right? So that eliminated recruiting, like, which is the
five
number one thing
left.
in college sports, right? Like,
Yeah,
um, and now Harvard lost a lot of their players last year, like LaFerrier's in the NHL, but it's great to see where those players have gone, like Henry Thron. But at the same time, now you're seeing, they're not competitive. So now it's not like a 2 or 3 team race. I would love to see them in the Hockey East. I want to hear your opinions on if another team like Quinnipiac, the reigning national champs, who now they brought in a kid, Mason Marcellus, 8 goals. Like
yeah.
he's popping off. You're seeing where now the recruiting is only going to make them better and a better program. What would it be like if Quinnipiac entered the Hockey East right now?
Yeah, I mean, I think it would be awesome. Especially just for Quinnipiac, like, for their development too and their prospects. Obviously, they have a really big pull now seeing the
Hmm.
success they've had, but when that dwindles out, when all those guys are gone, you wanna be able to keep growing the program, and not to say they won't be able to do that in ECAC, those teams have had such success, but I do think the Hockey East, the internal competition is always strong. This is
Hmm.
the first year that BU and BC have kind of been really good at the same time, but last year UConn was kind of a dark horse, Matthew Wood. This year, Maine has pulled some upsets, and UMass Lowell is always a scary team to play. Um, UMass Amherst obviously won the Natty a couple years ago. They're they're all right. I'm never too afraid to play UMass, but no Hockey East series you're going in there being like this is a clean sweep. And I think that's good. Like Hockey East wants to be recognized as a scary conference. They want the Big
Hmm.
10 teams to go over playing Hockey East instead of, when we play a Big 10 team, it's kind of our headline. Um,
Hmm.
so yeah, I mean, I think the better the internal competition is, the better they're going to do on the national stage. And I think it would be awesome for Quinnipiac too, just to grow that program, grow the fan base, have them play, more New England schools, have prospects and kids growing up be able to be like, oh, I want to go play at Quinnipiac. Like they're part of that, BU, BC, Providence, whatever you want to call it. So yeah, I mean, I'm for it. Why not?
Yeah, they scheduled like a ton of Hockey East this
Well,
year.
it's
So everyone was
it's
kind of like,
suspicious how much Hockey East they're playing this year.
right?
I
Like
will
a
say,
Wednesday game against BU. Okay.
yeah, because that was
Um,
our Notre Dame game last year, like the pre-Thanksgiving one.
mhm.
So yeah, I know. I'd look into it.
Now, which team do you think the Bruins or Boston University Terriers are going further this year?
Oof. Boston University
Yeah.
Terriers. And I'm not I just in terms of depth, that was gonna be my answer for BU. Like I could talk about their bottom six for so long.
Mhm.
And even defensively, like we're running an extra defenseman every game just because the guys are too good to scratch and you want to get them ice time. But when the Bruins' depth has been tested this year, they were down 3 defensemen because Forbort was hurt too. So it was Forbort was out, McAvoy was out, and Grizzlick was out. They had 3 new defensemen, and the lines were kind of jumbled because of injuries, and they came out and they beat the Maple Leafs that night. So, when they've been called to the test, they've kind of responded, but you say it particularly with this team too, it's like it's regular season. What
Mhm.
does that look like postseason? I think a conversation that's been had is, do they rotate the goalies if they make it, honestly, at this point, when they make it into the playoffs,
Mhm.
because that's what works so well. But I don't know, I just think the star power and the the window for BU is a little different,
Mhm.
might be Lane Hutson's last year, Macklin might run away after the draft. Hopefully he comes back. But yeah, I think the pressure's on for Bruins too. But you just look at even the East, and it's like the teams that they would have to beat to make it to a Stanley Cup final. I just I I'm not sure if it's past the second round, honestly.
Really?
I don't know. I
Okay.
mean,
I hear you. It's early.
considering you look at like who I guess the Sabres have gotten off to a much worse start than anyone else thought. Um,
Mhm.
but I just think playoffs are such a different story. But they have that extra kick. If they make to the playoffs, I mean, I would really not bet that they would lose in the first round again. Just because of, the pride point. And they're a good team. Like the Boston Bruins are a really good team. I don't know if everyone thought it was going to be night and day without Bergeron and Krejci, but it's not. Um,
Mhm.
I don't know if they're a Stanley Cup final team, and I honestly hope I come back and eat my words and cover a Stanley Cup final, but I just don't have the full confidence right now to say that they're gonna be a conference final team.
Now, last question. I've been grilling you today. So
Yeah.
I'm been grilling you. With interviewing players, what's it like to interview David Pastrnak?
It's a huge scrum, so it's very much trying to get in there, but he's great with the media. He's always funny. He gives good quotes. He's also just such a hockey player, like he goes in there, he's like, my teammates are great. I love scoring. And that's about it. It's cool that he's an assistant captain this year too. He's definitely, I would say, more lead by example, but you can see he has to take on a bit more of a vocal role. So he's not given as much to the media. Like Marchand has to talk every day, which is funny seeing him in that position. Um, who else is Charlie Coyle? I will say is probably the best guy to talk to.
Really?
Him and Brandon Carlo are they're really thoughtful in their responses, and I think they take kind of the perception of the team really seriously too, and they're just proud to be there. Um, yeah, Coyle really he's like there to talk. He'll give you a good answer. So yeah, it's been cool getting to talk to those guys. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Well, that is awesome to hear that everything's going well for both teams recovering this year.
Yeah,
And well, listen, we'll have you on later in the year because I'm sure with hoops, we'll see what happens with both teams. See what happens with Frozen Four with Minnesota. It's in
yeah.
Minnesota this
Hopefully,
year,
I'll see you
so
in Minnesota, right?
yeah, hopefully you'll be traveling out there for that. And on top of that, maybe some Bruins playoff action. We'll see what
Imagine.
happens with that
What am I
too.
supposed to do?
Yeah, like if it's
Eastern
the in
Conference
between,
Final,
yeah,
Rangers Bruins.
that would be I mean, you'd have the subway to travel to, so
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
it'll
That'd
make
be
it
a
a little
plus.
bit easier for you,
Yeah,
so
yeah,
well, thank you, Belle, for coming on. Read all of her material at the Hockey News. We have team sites there. Very easy to find if you want to know as much as possible. We have the inside at the Hockey News. Got the stories. Thank you, Belle, for coming on. And we'll talk soon enough about Bruins, Rangers, and QUBU.
yeah. Thanks for having me on.
Of course. And always remember, it's just the luck of the puck.